What happens when a royal guest thinks she can rewrite the rules of British television? In just 47 seconds, one comment would transform Meghan Markle from welcomed guest to unwanted presence on Loose Women. This is the story of how Janet Street Porter became the hero Britain needed, standing firm against entitlement and protecting the integrity of daytime television. What you're about to hear will shock you. The ITV studios buzzed with excitement that Tuesday morning. Loose Women was preparing for what producers called their biggest interview of the year. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, had agreed to appear on the panel show to discuss her latest charitable endeavors. The production team had spent weeks preparing, knowing this appearance could make headlines worldwide. Janet Street Porter sat at her usual spot on the panel, her silver hair perfectly styled, her expression serious as always. She had been doing television for decades and had seen every type of guest imaginable, but something about today felt different. The other panelists were unusually nervous. Colleen Nolan fidgeted with her notes, glancing repeatedly at the studio entrance. "I still can't believe she's actually coming," she whispered to Denise Welch, who was applying a final touch of lipstick. "Just remember what the producer said," Denise replied quietly. "Keep it light, keep it friendly. This is huge for the show." Ruth Langsford, the day's anchor, reviewed her questions one final time. As the most experienced interviewer on the panel, she knew the importance of this moment. "Ladies, we need to be professional but warm. This could be the interview that defines our careers." Stacey Solomon bounced slightly in her chair, her usual bubbly energy barely contained. "I've got so many questions about her charity work. This is going to be amazing." The studio lights dimmed momentarily as the production assistant gave the 5-minute warning. Camera operators took their positions, sound engineers did final checks, and the audience settled into their seats. The anticipation was electric. Janet remained calm, her journalist instincts telling her to stay alert. She had interviewed politicians, celebrities, and royalty before. She knew that the most important interviews were often the ones where unexpected things happened. Her pen was ready, her mind sharp. "Remember," Ruth addressed the panel one last time, "we represent British television today. Let's make sure we do it proud." The studio doors opened, and Meghan Markle entered with her entourage. She wore an elegant cream-colored dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her smile was practiced, her movements calculated for the cameras that were already rolling behind-the-scenes footage. "Good morning, ladies," Meghan said as she approached the desk. Her American accent seemed more pronounced than usual, perhaps emphasized for effect. "Thank you so much for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here." The panelists stood to greet her, each offering warm handshakes and welcoming smiles. But Janet noticed something in Meghan's eyes, a certain expectation that made her journalist senses tingle. "We're honored to have you," Ruth replied graciously. "Please, take your seat, and we'll get started in just a moment." As Meghan settled into the guest chair, she immediately began rearranging items on the desk. She moved the water glass to a different position, adjusted the angle of the microphone, and shifted the small decorative flowers that were part of the set design. "The lighting seems a bit harsh from this angle," Meghan commented to one of the camera operators. "Could we possibly adjust that?" Janet watched this behavior with growing interest. In all her years in television, she had rarely seen a guest immediately start directing the technical aspects of a show. Most people were grateful just to be there. The floor manager began the countdown. 30 seconds to air, everyone. Places, please." Meghan took a deep breath, her public smile sliding into place like a mask. But Janet could see the calculation behind it, the way her eyes darted around the studio as if she were already planning her next move. "And we're live in 5, 4, 3, 2. The floor manager pointed to Ruth. "Good morning and welcome to Loose Women. I'm Ruth Langsford, and today we have a very special guest joining our panel." Ruth's professional smile was warm and genuine. "Please welcome the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle." The audience applauded enthusiastically as Meghan waved gracefully. "Thank you so much for that wonderful welcome. It's such a pleasure to be here with all of you incredible women." Colleen leaned forward eagerly. "We're absolutely delighted to have you. Can you tell us about your recent charity work? We know our viewers are very interested in the causes you support." Meghan's expression shifted subtly, becoming more serious and rehearsed. "Well, Colleen, I think it's important to understand that my approach to charitable work is quite different from the traditional model. I'm not just writing checks or making appearances. I'm actually creating systemic change." Janet raised an eyebrow at the phrase systemic change. It was exactly the kind of buzzword that politicians used when they wanted to sound important without saying anything specific. "That sounds wonderful," Stacey chimed in enthusiastically. Can you give us some specific examples of the changes you're making? I'm glad you asked, Stacy. Meghan turned toward the camera with practiced precision. My team and I have been working tirelessly to reimagine what modern philanthropy looks like. We're not just addressing symptoms, we're addressing root causes. Denise nodded politely, though Janet could see a slight confusion in her eyes. And what would you say are these root causes you're addressing? Meghan paused dramatically, as if the question required deep consideration. The root causes are complex, Denise. They involve structural inequalities, institutional barriers, and frankly, outdated ways of thinking about social responsibility. Janet had heard enough vague corporate speak to last a lifetime. She decided it was time to ask a real question. That all sounds very impressive, Meghan, but could you tell us about one specific project? Something concrete that our viewers could understand and perhaps support? The request seemed to catch Meghan off guard. Her smile flickered for just a moment. Well, Janet, I think the work speaks for itself. We've been incredibly busy launching initiatives across multiple sectors. I'm sure you have, Janet replied evenly. But I'm asking for just one specific example, one project, one result, one concrete thing you've accomplished. The studio suddenly felt smaller as Meghan's carefully constructed composure began to shift. Her media training had prepared her for softball questions about inspiration and empowerment, not the direct accountability that Janet Street Porter was demanding. I think, Janet, that perhaps you don't fully understand the scope of what we're trying to achieve, Meghan said, her voice taking on a slightly sharper edge. This isn't about one project. This is about transformation on a global scale. Ruth sensed the tension building and tried to redirect. Of course, and we appreciate the ambitious nature of your work. Perhaps you could tell us about how you balance your charitable commitments with your family life? But Janet wasn't finished. Years of interviewing evasive politicians had taught her to recognize deflection tactics. I understand perfectly well, Meghan, but our viewers are practical people. They want to know where their support goes. So I'll ask again. Can you name one specific project and tell us exactly what it has accomplished? Meghan's smile became more forced. Janet, I'm not sure why you're being so confrontational. I came here to have a positive conversation about making a difference in the world. I'm not being confrontational, Janet replied calmly. I'm being a journalist. There's a difference. Colleen jumped in quickly, trying to smooth things over. Of course, Meghan. Maybe you could tell us about what inspired you to focus on charitable work in the first place? Meghan turned gratefully toward Colleen, her relief visible. Thank you, Colleen. That's such a thoughtful question. You know, I've always believed that with privilege comes responsibility. Even before I married into the royal family, I was passionate about social justice. That's beautiful, Stacy said supportively. And now you have such a platform to make a real difference. Exactly, Stacy. The platform is everything. It's about using your voice when others can't use theirs. It's about amplifying the voiceless and creating space for important conversations. Janet couldn't help herself. But who specifically are these voiceless people you're amplifying? And what conversations are you creating space for? Meghan's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Janet, I feel like you're trying to trap me with these questions. The work we do touches on so many different communities and issues. I'm not trying to trap anyone, Janet said firmly. I'm trying to get answers. Our viewers deserve to know what they're being asked to support. Denise tried to lighten the mood with a laugh. Well, this is certainly getting passionate. That's what happens when you put strong women together, right? But Meghan didn't laugh. Instead, she turned directly to face Janet. You know what, Janet? I think there's something you need to understand. I didn't have to come here today. I chose to come here as a favor to your show. The words hung in the air like a challenge. The other panelists exchanged uncomfortable glances, while the studio audience sat in stunned silence. Ruth's professional instincts kicked in immediately. Well, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. But Janet's expression didn't change. A favor to our show? I'm sorry. I must have missed something. I thought this was a mutual arrangement. You have something to promote and we provide a platform. Meghan's composure cracked further. I think you're misunderstanding the situation here. Do you have any idea what my usual appearance fee is? The question sent shockwaves through the studio. Colleen's mouth fell open slightly. Stacy looked genuinely confused. Denise blinked in surprise, but Janet remained steady. Are you telling us that you expect to be paid for this interview? Janet asked quietly. I'm telling you that I'm here as a courtesy, Meghan replied, her voice rising slightly. I could be on any show in the world right now. CNN, BBC, Good Morning America. But I chose to be here with you. And we're grateful for that choice, Ruth interjected quickly. Shall we talk about your upcoming projects? But Janet wasn't backing down. No, Ruth, I think we need to address this. Meghan, are you saying that appearing on Loose Women is somehow beneath you? I never said that, Meghan snapped, then caught herself and tried to smile. I'm just saying that I think you might want to show a little more appreciation for what I'm bringing to your show. What exactly are you bringing? Janet asked. Because so far, we've had a lot of corporate buzzwords and not much substance. The studio was electric with tension. Camera operators glanced nervously at each other. The floor manager looked ready to signal a commercial break. But Janet continued, Our viewers are intelligent people, Meghan. They can tell the difference between someone who's actually doing the work and someone who's just talking about doing the work. Meghan's face flushed. How dare you suggest that I'm not doing the work? Do you have any idea what I've sacrificed to be in this position? What have you sacrificed? Janet asked genuinely. Everything. Meghan's voice cracked with emotion, though whether it was real or performed was unclear. My career, my privacy, my freedom. I gave up everything to serve, and this is the thanks I get? Stacy looked genuinely sympathetic. That must have been really difficult for you. It was, Stacy. Thank you for understanding. Some people, Meghan glanced pointedly at Janet, seem to think that service should be easy, that dedication doesn't come with costs. Janet remained unmoved. I respect service and sacrifice, Meghan, but I also respect honesty. And honestly, I'm still waiting for you to tell us about one specific thing you've actually accomplished. This is ridiculous, Meghan said, her composure finally beginning to crumble. I shouldn't have to justify my work to you or anyone else. The results speak for themselves. Do they? Janet pressed. Because I haven't heard any results yet. Colleen tried once more to rescue the situation. Maybe we could talk about your family? How are you adjusting to life in California? But Meghan seemed to have lost interest in playing along with the format. You know what, Colleen? I think this interview is taking a direction that I'm not comfortable with. Ruth's experienced hosting skills kicked in. I'm sorry you feel that way. Perhaps we could find a topic that would be more comfortable for you to discuss. The topic isn't the problem, Meghan said, her eyes fixed on Janet. The problem is that some people here seem more interested in tearing down than building up. Janet's voice remained steady and professional. I'm interested in the truth, Meghan. If that feels like tearing down, perhaps you should examine why. The words hit their target. Meghan's carefully maintained public persona cracked completely. You know what, Janet? Meghan's voice rose to a level that made everyone in the studio freeze. I think I've had quite enough of your attitude. Do you know who you're talking to? The question landed like a bomb in the middle of the Loose Women set. Janet's eyebrows raised slightly, the only sign that she was surprised by the outburst. The other panelists sat in stunned silence, unsure how to respond to what was rapidly becoming the most dramatic moment in the show's history. I'm talking to a guest on our show, Janet replied calmly. Same as I would talk to any guest. Any guest? Meghan's laugh was sharp and bitter. I am not just any guest, Janet. I am a member of the royal family. I am a duchess. And I will not sit here and be treated like some reality television star looking for attention. The studio audience gasped audibly. Ruth looked desperately at the floor manager, who was frantically gesturing toward his headset, clearly receiving instructions from the control room. Denise tried to salvage the situation with a nervous laugh. Well, this is certainly more exciting than our usual Tuesday show, but Meghan wasn't finished. She turned back to Janet, her eyes blazing with indignation. I came here today to do you a favor, to give your little show some credibility, and this is how you repay me? With interrogation and disrespect? Little show? Janet's voice remained level, but there was steel in it now. Meghan, this little show has been running for over 20 years. We've interviewed prime ministers, Nobel Prize winners, and yes, even royalty. None of them felt the need to remind us of their titles. Colleen shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Perhaps we should take a short break. No, Meghan said firmly, holding up her hand like she was stopping traffic. I want to finish what I came here to say. Janet, your behavior today has been completely unprofessional. You've been hostile from the moment I sat down. I've been doing my job, Janet replied, which is to ask questions that matter to our viewers. Your viewers? Meghan scoffed. Do you honestly think your viewers care about project details and charity specifics? They want to hear about inspiration, about hope, about making the world a better place. Stacy, who had been quiet during the escalating confrontation, finally spoke up. Actually, Meghan, I think our viewers are pretty smart. They do like to know the details. Meghan turned to Stacy with a look of betrayal. Too, Stacy? I thought at least some of you would understand what I'm trying to do here. We do understand, Ruth said diplomatically. But Janet is right to ask for specifics. That's what good journalism looks like. Good journalism? Meghan's voice cracked with disbelief. "This isn't journalism. This is an ambush. I was told this would be a friendly conversation about my charitable work." Janet leaned forward slightly. "It was meant to be a conversation about your charitable work, but you haven't told us about any actual work yet." "I don't have to prove anything to you," Meghan snapped, her composure completely gone now. "I've already proven myself to the world. I've already made my sacrifices and paid my dues." "What sacrifices?" Janet pressed. "You keep mentioning sacrifices, but you haven't specified what you've actually given up." Meghan's face was flushed with anger now. "I gave up my acting career. I gave up my independence. I gave up my voice to serve an institution that didn't appreciate me." "You gave up your voice?" Janet asked, with genuine curiosity. "Because it seems like you've found your voice again quite loudly." "That's it," Meghan said, starting to stand up from her chair. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this." Ruth immediately tried to de-escalate. "Please, Meghan, sit down. Let's find a way to have a productive conversation." But Meghan remained standing, her hands shaking with rage. "Productive? There's nothing productive about this. This woman," she pointed directly at Janet, "has been trying to humiliate me from the moment I walked in here." "I've been trying to get answers," Janet said simply. "You've been trying to make me look bad on national television." Meghan's voice was now loud enough to be heard clearly throughout the entire studio. Janet's response was quiet and measured. "Meghan, I think you're doing that quite well on your own." The words hit like a physical blow. Meghan's eyes widened in shock and fury. For a moment, it seemed like she might actually storm off the set, but instead, she sat back down heavily, her breathing rapid and shallow. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "How absolutely dare you speak to me that way?" "I'm speaking to you the way I speak to everyone," Janet replied, with honesty. Colleen looked around the table desperately. "Maybe we should all just take a deep breath here." "Don't tell me to take a deep breath," Meghan snapped at Colleen. "You've all been sitting here letting her attack me for the past 10 minutes. "Nobody's attacking you," Denise said gently. "Janet was just asking questions." "Just asking questions?" Meghan's laugh was bitter. "She's been trying to trap me, to make me look incompetent, to undermine everything I stand for." Janet shook her head slowly. "Meghan, the only person who can undermine what you stand for is you. And right now, you're doing a pretty thorough job of it." That was the final straw. Meghan shot to her feet again, this time with such force that her chair rolled backward. "That's enough," she shouted. "I will not sit here and be insulted by someone who clearly doesn't understand the first thing about public service or sacrifice." The studio was dead silent, except for the hum of the cameras, which were still rolling, capturing every moment of the meltdown. Janet looked up at Meghan calmly. "Then perhaps you should leave." This simple suggestion seemed to shock everyone in the studio. Ruth's eyes went wide. The other panelists looked between Janet and Meghan like they were watching a tennis match. Even the camera operators seemed frozen. Meghan stared at Janet in disbelief. "Are you kicking me off your show?" Janet's voice was steady and clear. "I'm suggesting that if you're not comfortable answering basic questions about your work, then perhaps a talk show isn't the right venue for you." "You can't kick me off," Meghan said, her voice rising to near hysteria. "Do you know who I am? Do you know what kind of trouble you're going to be in?" "I know exactly who you are," Janet replied calmly. "You're someone who came on our show, refused to answer straightforward questions, insulted our program and our viewers, and then threw a tantrum when you didn't get the fawning treatment you expected." Meghan's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. She looked around the table at the other panelists, clearly expecting them to come to her defense, but they all sat in stunned silence. Finally, Ruth found her voice. "Meghan, perhaps if you could just answer one of Janet's questions, we could move forward." But Meghan was beyond reason now. "I don't owe any of you anything," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "Especially not her." She pointed at Janet again. Janet stood up slowly, her movement deliberate and controlled. "Then I think we're done here." The words rang out across the studio with finality. For the first time since the confrontation began, Meghan seemed to realize that she had pushed too far. Her expression shifted from anger to something approaching panic. "You can't end this interview," she said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "I just did," Janet replied simply. And with that, the most dramatic interview in Loose Women history came to an abrupt end, leaving viewers across Britain stunned by what they had just witnessed. Janet Street Porter had done what many had wanted to see for years. She had held someone accountable, regardless of their title or status. In 47 seconds of escalating confrontation, she had shown that in Britain, no one is above answering a simple, honest question.